Happy Wednesday, Unwoke Nation, and we want to welcome you to episode 5 of the Unwoke Show, where free speech is welcome, all subjects are on the table, and your boys get raw and uncut every week for your enjoyment, baby. Hey, I'm your co-host Rich, along with my friend and buddy right here. So, Big Tim, how you doing, Tim?
Good, and you, Rich?
Doing great, man, doing great. So, guys, thank you for being a part of the show once again and hearing us every single week on Wednesday. Remember, guys, you can always reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you at our email at feedback at Unwoke the Show. Once again, that's feedback at Unwoke the Show. Definitely love to hear from you guys, where maybe there's some topics you guys want us to cover. We definitely want to be able to make sure we are entertaining you with our topics and making sure that, we're keeping everybody up to date with a lot of stuff that's going on. But it's been pretty good. But, some guys, we're actually really happy right now because today, as I mentioned before, it is episode 5. We've been learning a lot about podcasting on. One thing that's really good is that apparently, from what Tim has done his research, he's our Poindexter over here with a great research. And also that apparently it's like, getting to episode 5 is a milestone. So we are definitely very proud of that, and proud of you guys are definitely tuning in each and every week on Wednesday. So guys, we got a really good topic for today, and also I'm going to let Tim break us out for this one. So Tim, what's top for today?
Today we are going to cover mass shootings.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And everything associated with that. So I thought I would start us off with the definition of what's considered a mass shooting. And according to the FBI, it's defined as 3 or more killings in a single incident.
Okay. I didn't know there was actually a definition behind it.
Well, it's, you want to lump, I guess, as many people into it as you want, or they needed to come up with a definition or something. I don't know.
Isn't it because it's some definition that says a group of 3 is considered a crowd?
It could be 4 is a party. Heck, I don't know.
Something like that.
Yeah, not really sure.
Yeah.
But so that's the definition of what's considered a mass shooting. So what I wanted to do is I went back, did a little research, and really started looking at when I would say mass shootings started arriving on the scene. I think any shooting that involves a gun is going to grab attention, whether it's your local or national news, right? I mean,
right.
It just somebody used a gun, we got a report on it, and beat it down your throat, right? Mm-hmm. So starting off in 2019, there were 415 mass shootings in the U.S.
Wow.
In 2020, there were 610 mass shootings in the U.S.
Wow.
2021, 690 mass shootings.
Almost 700. Wow.
And 2022, there were 647 mass shootings in the U.S.
So on average, where you're looking at about 300 and something on average.
That would be on average.
Right. Wow. I was not aware of that many going on.
Well, for 2023, I think we're well on our way of surpassing, I would say, that 690 number. Not that we should be, that's not something to celebrate, obviously, but just purely from a statistical standpoint, right, of where things are going or trending. You know what they all have in common? And it's not what you're going to think.
What?
I would imagine most of our listeners are going to say, well, mass shooting, it's going to involve guns. Right? No, it's actually people.
Okay. That makes total sense. Because for a gun to work, you have to pull the trigger, right?
Exactly. And I'm sure our audience out there would be instantly thinking, well, the common denominator would be, a firearm, a handgun, and an assault rifle, right? That has been a major sticking point today, where the federal government has been really looking in to figure out how can we get an assault weapons ban passed. And then if you've been paying attention to the news lately, what's going on in Washington State where they are going to pass a law, and it will be signed into law, that anything that could go into the production, essentially, of an assault style firearm would be considered, illegal.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, I was not aware of that law, but
So you've got California and their thought process, and then Washington State has been paying attention, so they're going to pick up stuff from California and try to take it one step further.
state of Washington, who's got them and Oregon have half of their eastern counties were wanting to actually defect.
Yeah, pretty
because
much.
of all the crap that's going on in Portland and also Seattle.
Yep. So I thought for our listeners, because there seems to be this misconception that AR stands for assault rifle, which, if you do your research, AR actually stands for Armalite, which is a firearms manufacturer.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought I would go ahead and clarify for our listeners what the real definition of an assault style rifle is. And so an assault rifle is a military firearm that is chambered for ammunition of reduced size or propellant charge, and that has the capacity to switch between semi-automatic and fully automatic fire. So us being normal everyday firearms enthusiasts that are out there, and if you're a firearm enthusiast, great. If you know anything about firearm law or firearms that are sold to the general public, you will know that the general public can't walk into a Cabela's or any other firearms retail outlet and buy an assault rifle. Mm-hmm. Okay, we can only purchase semi-automatic, which means that every time I pull the trigger, a round is going to go off, versus full automatic, where I just pull the trigger back and keep it pulled back, and it's just going to spit out round after round after round. Right. Okay. So hopefully we have provided some clarity to our listeners about what an actual assault rifle is and what AR stands for.
Right. See, and I think that's what the problem is nowadays, is that we hear so much in all the news medias that it's so much about, they just say AR words, and they just keep using this without really educating the general public of exactly what it is. So you've done a world of difference just trying to explain to people. It's like, oh, well, we all thought that AR means assault rifle. No, it doesn't. So
that's what the media wants you to believe and to feed you, and without. Well, if the media said it's AR's assault rifle, that's what it is, right? Mm-hmm. We're void of the fact that we actually got to do our own research to what that really means.
Oh my God, you mean actually trying to think for yourself?
I know, it's crazy, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely nuts.
Wow.
So now that we have clarified what an assault rifle is, mm-hmm. and how the general public cannot own an actual assault rifle, we only get the semi-automatic variant.
Right.
I want to clear up this second misconception about firearms and mass shootings. And that is, mass shootings are committed by people. Okay?
Right.
Firearms don't get up in the morning, hop out of the safe, grab their buddy the magazine, trot on over to their owner while he or she are having their breakfast and coffee, or if it's a teenager having their cereal, and saying, "You want to go out and shoot some people today? What are we doing today?"
Exactly.
And so when these atrocities happen, because mass shootings are just, literally horrible
right
events, right? It shouldn't be happening, but everybody, and I feel confident in lumping the majority of the United States in some capacity, feel that if we take away a firearm, these types of atrocities will stop happening.
No.
I don't know in any situation where taking something away ultimately leads to things not happening.
See, and that's what I don't get either. It's, you know, we have a side of the topic that, and I would almost go as far as saying that it's almost like a sneaky way of them looking at this and all saying, oh, we don't want to really take away all your guns like that, when really the agenda truly is that. And as I've said on previous episodes, where so this ideology of this, you know, sunshine and unicorn idea of that if we just completely take away all guns, because if I understand correctly, I don't know if you did the research on it all, but apparently if I understand, I think Canada has now tried to do something similar to that.
So there's no trying. They're doing.
Okay. All right.
Justin Trudeau is doing everything humanly possible, from handguns to assault rifles to shotguns to bolt action rifles as well, is trying to eliminate any and all means of firearms. I mean, you can forget about hunting and stuff, I mean, at that point, but it is trying to enact laws that'll make it damn nearly impossible. Okay. If not impossible.
So basically you have a situation where that's a perfect example. Where now we have it where if we disarm a nation, we think that that's going to lead to there being less crime or different things like that. Now, for myself, you know, so I'm from the Midwest. I'm from one of the largest towns in the United States. And there are a lot of situations going on where there have been so many laws tried to put together to eliminate guns and stuff like that. But in fact, in the town where I'm from, it's a situation where we've had homicide rates that are averaging 600. We will get a Saturday that will on average have somewhere between 14 to 20 something shootings.
And that's on a slow.
Oh yeah, you're absolutely right. In my city, that's a slow day.
Yeah, and so I mean, it's essentially a live action version of Call of Duty.
Basically, that's basically what it is. And so you have all these politicians where they have this idea, like Justin Trudeau and some of the other ones that we have here, even in the United States, and thinking that that's going to be solving the problem, which I've mentioned on shows before, where it's like, the requirement of you being a criminal is for you to break the law. So the mentality of thinking that by, quote, taking guns away, that they're just going to say, okay, I guess we're just going to stop robbing people. Well, that didn't seem to work in Chicago last night, or back on Saturday. I mean, because, yeah, we had, four people were shot? Because the teenagers were coming down and shooting people like that and all, but that sure didn't stop crime. When the majority of them didn't have any guns, they were still attacking people, beating people up, stepping on people's windshield wipers, doing all those different things. But you're thinking, as being one of the cities where that's so pro about trying to get rid of guns, where homicides are still going up, and you still have young people doing crazy stuff on the weekend, and which, by the way, for those people who might be in the town, and I'll just name it, just Chicago, that already has recent information already showing that they're going to try to do a part 2 of that in the upcoming weekend, and dealing with that. It's like, it doesn't make any sense.
It wasn't part 2 trending on Twitter as well?
Yes, it was.
Yeah.
It literally was trending on Twitter. It's, I think one of the Fox affiliates actually was reporting about it about this afternoon. They actually interviewed one of the ladies, one of the mothers of one of the kids that got shot. And that's what they said. They actually found out, the authorities said that where it is trending as of right now, that they plan on doing another part 2 of what they just did in Chicago last week.
Yeah, I don't get it. I don't understand it.
And I know it's kind of off subject and everything, so it's just kind of
it's right along those lines of just. I mean, let's just be honest. Just stupid thinking.
Yeah.
Just flat out stupid thinking. So, I was curious to see what are considered the most deadliest modern mass shootings. And I really think this whole mass shooting thing really caught fire in probably 2017. If you remember the Harvest Music Festival in Las Vegas.
Yes, I do remember that.
Yeah.
That was a horrible day. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, 60 killed and more than 850 injured. Mm-hmm. And then Pulse nightclub in Orlando, Florida.
I remember that. It was a gay club or something.
That was a gay nightclub where 49 were killed and 53 were injured.
My goodness.
Another famous one, Virginia Tech.
Yeah.
Right? There were 32 killed, and that happened in 2007.
And I remember that being on the news because that guy was rolling around campus for an hour.
Yeah.
It took them over an hour to finally apprehend him.
Okay. Probably the one that has grabbed the most notoriety is Sandy Hook Elementary.
Yeah.
Right, that was in Newton, Connecticut, and that was December 2012, where 26 were killed.
Yeah.
First Baptist Church. I believe that was
Texas.
Yep. Sutherland Springs, Texas, November 2017. Mm-hmm. 26 killed, 20 injured. And so, I mean, I could go on. Probably another notorious one that gets brought up is the University of Texas Tower in Austin, Texas. That was 1966. Mm-hmm. The guy was up there in the tower with a bolt-action rifle, and he killed 16 people around campus.
Wow.
Here's another one that caught my eye. Just because I had forgot about it. Columbine High School.
Yeah, 1994, I think it was.
1999, 13 killed.
Yeah.
Of course, Michael Moore made a movie about it, Bowling for Columbine. Right. That's where we heard the term trench coat mafia.
Yeah, I remember I was in college at that time and remember seeing that in my dorm. It's like, wow.
So I wanted to put some context around what the term trench coat mafia meant, because we all heard it. We weren't really sure what it meant or what it was and stuff like that. And so it was a group of individuals that would wear long black trench coats in the summer. And so the jocks were making fun of these kids that were wearing these long black coats in the middle of summer when it's warm. And so the football, the jocks and stuff, started calling them the trench coat mafia. Mm-hmm. So what happened was these individuals who were wearing these coats ended up coming together as a group and started calling themselves the trench coat mafia.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and so they took it as a badge of honor in attempts to fight back against popular athletes and jocks in schools. The trench coat mafia ridiculed the jocks right back, attempting to stand up against bullies in school, which then ultimately two students, an Eric Harris and a Dylan Klebold, they were fans and members of the trench coat mafia. They planted 2 homemade propane time bombs in the school's cafeteria, went on a killing spree in the school carrying 1 Hi-Point 995 carbine rifle, a sawed-off Savage shotgun, a sawed-off double-barrel shotgun, and a Tech 9 semi-automatic pistol.
Oh my goodness.
They killed 12 students, 1 teacher, and injured 24 other students before committing simultaneous suicide. So I thought that was interesting because the other thing that is entangled with mass shootings is mental health.
Yeah. And I know you mentioned that on the show last time too.
Yeah. So, and what I don't think is happening, and it's not being, or not happening, but it's not being spoken enough, is when mass shootings are reported to everyone, right, on the news. Most of the people that are committing these mass shootings end up either A, committing suicide, so really it's a mass shooting suicide, or B, are killed by law enforcement. So recently in Tennessee, right?
Yeah.
We saw that.
In Nashville, right.
Yep. And so really what's happening is you have mass shooting suicides taking place. Mm-hmm. And for these people that are committing it, I mean, that's the intent. That's their plan.
Right.
Right? And so ultimately what's happening is they're not, these people that are committing these shootings, it's part attention, okay? Mm-hmm. Maybe they feel ostracized in some capacity, or they're having a mental, something is wrong with them mentally, mental illness, right? Because we're seeing more and more of this. In fact, CNN did an article about mass shootings and the ramifications leading, the potential leading to mental illness, mental suffering for, these people. And, I really looked hard to see if there were some commonalities.
And I think another thing too that's interesting about this is that it always seems like, the people who are causing these mass shootings, they always seem to leave some type of trace. There's always like some manifesto, there's always some situation that's going on that gives people a little bit of an inkling of what's going on. Like in 1999, one of the first questions people were asking when it came to the Columbine shootings was, where are the parents? Why didn't anybody notice where these kids had these type of intentions? And that's such a hard thing. And it seems like in a lot of the cases we've been having lately with these mass shootings, these are the things that are coming up. Oh, they wrote something on Facebook, or they had something on Reddit, or whatever the case may be, where they kind of gave a little bit of an inkling that there was something up and something very, very wrong.
And but I don't think parents knew what to look for. I would argue that today we probably still don't really know what to look for when it's going on.
Like strange behavior or something like, yeah.
Yeah, or a traumatic event. Take the incident up at Michigan State University.
Yeah.
The gentleman he walked around with a handgun, and unfortunately some students were shot and died. And it came out later that they think the traumatic event in that individual's life is the fact that his mother had recently passed away.
Oh, wow.
And so in doing my research, I found there was an article on Politico. Take that for what it's worth if you're not a Politico fan, right? So, and we'll leave the links for what we found with this podcast, because I think it's important to kind of get context and get an idea of what we're talking about, especially on such a front and center subject that mass shooting is right now, and even probably firearms to that. In that, it's just how upfront that is right now. Mm-hmm. So there was a study done by a Gillian Peterson, an associate professor of criminology at Hamline University, and James Densley, a professor of criminal justice at Metro State University. They decided to look into the idea of, are there identifiable common traits or events that had taken place in the particular individual's past that would have led them down the road of committing a mass shooting / suicide. Mm-hmm. And so they were looking for meaningful evidence based on understanding of why mass shooters do what they do, right? And this was funded by the National Institute of Justice, which is the research arm of the Department of Justice. Okay. So in this article, they identified what they would consider a consistent pathway or essentially a pathway that might lead up to, what we're talking about right now, right? And some of the commonality seems to center around early childhood trauma, seems to be the foundation, whether violence in homes, sexual assault, parental suicides, extreme bullying. And I thought that was interesting because we have been seeing a lot of bullying related stories in the news.
Yeah, I mean, not only just in schools in person, but also on social media, where it's incredible how many situations we've heard about. There's been some type of bullying and going on social media where it might lead to a kid wanting to bring a gun or something like that. It's just it's a horrible thing. I mean, Tim and I, we never had to deal with that, growing up. So,
well, we dealt with bullying.
Well, true, yeah,
right. But our version of bullying was done face to face.
Yeah,
right.
Forward. See you after school.
Yeah, and I mean that's how it was. Like in the hallways. Getting each other faces, right? Teacher coming to break it up, or if you had to go down to the principal or what, or what was going on. But yeah, ultimately it was decided usually decided by the two individuals after school. Mm-hmm. We didn't have any mechanism or tool, i.e. social media, to hide behind.
Right.
Number one, and number two, their social media presence or who they feel they are on social media is a direct reflection of who they are physically, which obviously is an unintended consequence of social media.
Right.
So what you have is these kids who don't know how to discern between, okay, that's just on social media, I'm not paying any attention to that, that's just bullshit, whatever. Right? Versus, I'm in person, I'm fine. Because what's happening is, if it's on social media, everybody is seeing it.
Right.
Right? And
do you think that probably leads people to be a little bit more, I don't know the word, like sensitive, or I'm trying to think of the proper word. It's like, because it does. It seems like a lot of kids nowadays where somebody says online, the little girl says, "Oh, Kathy's ears stick out" or something like that, and it was just like, the worst thing ever. And it's like, where, like I said, we grew up and on. It's like, hey, Tim, I don't like your shoes or wear it like that. I mean, it's just such a different time about how kids are, and it's horrible. It's horrible to see what they're going through and what they have to deal with on a daily basis. Especially, and then on top of that, you were saying previously, that might lead up to some of these mass shootings where you have a kid who's having problems at home, and then on top of that, say he or she is being bullied at school. I mean, that's just a lot to take on for a kid. I mean, that's wow.
Yeah, I mean, say you've got 500 friends on Facebook. Mm-hmm. Rich, you're 13 years old, 14 years old. Mm-hmm. You're 8th grade, getting ready going to high school, and think of all the people that would see a post, say I'm the one bullying you.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm calling, I don't know what, you're nothing, you're short, you're whatever description I want to come up with. Mm-hmm. Now you've got 500 people that are seeing that.
Yeah.
And then getting responses like, no, you're rude, you don't pay attention, you're not him, or, oh, that's who you are, you're ugly, you're fat, whatever, ha ha ha. Mm-hmm. Imagine getting bombarded by that.
Yeah. And like you said, you're in 8th grade, you're 14 years old or 13 or where, and just imagining, like, you're still in that development time, and kind of deal. I mean, that's got to be very, very tough. Very
Okay.
tough for a kid.
So now all of a sudden that's creeping in to, am I really that?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Then the external factors, right? Potential for, was there violence in the home? What was the childhood growing up like?
Right.
Heaven forbid the sexual assault or parental suicides, right? I mean, if you're a young kid and you come home and you learn that your mom committed suicide, and or you come home and you see that, right, lying on the floor, whether it's your mom, whether it's your dad, whether it's your brother, sister, and you see that, imagine the impact that could have on you. Linking back to the Trenchcoat Mafia, now you're online and you're looking for groups that are where you feel similar to, right? Where all of a sudden you're being ostracized online, or maybe it's going as far as now some people in school that you thought were your friends are not talking to you now because of something that was said about you that was completely false, but they believed it anyway. Right. So now you start to spiral a little bit. So then you try to find support groups, or not support. You try to find groups online that may fit with you, right? Or you identify with. Well, what if one of those groups talks about, oh, you should get back at them. Do you have something in your house? What can you do to get back at them? What can you, right?
That anger of the situation is starting to build up, and then
because you don't know how to deal with. You know what? It's online. I can just log off. Done. And if people say that, whatever. It's not true. I know that it's not true. Doesn't mean it's not going to hurt, right? In some capacity.
Yeah, I understand that.
I mean, we dealt with that even as kids, right? I mean,
sure.
Even though it was said to our face and stuff. I mean, and we're like, whatever. Fuck off. That's not us. That's not me. But you still, in some capacity, maybe go home and kind of question it for a minute.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas, if it's out there on social media, if it's out on the internet, it's essentially out there forever.
Right.
So there's a lack of coping and trying to understand how to deal with that. So now you feel ostracized. Like I said, you feel ostracized. You feel alone. You don't see any other way options. Or take the kid in Michigan whose parents bought him a gun, who he went to school and he committed or he shot up at the school, right? He took his firearm to school, and he was texting his parents saying, I need help. And they thought that this kid was, or maybe they thought he was maybe schizophrenic or something else, and his parents were just like, you know what, you just need to toughen up and deal with it. And so now the parents are going to be potentially held responsible. And I think the attorney for Michigan, they were going to potentially file manslaughter charges against the parents, and the parents are like, no, that was our son that was doing it. But there's text evidence saying he was asking for help, and you did nothing.
Right. And that's a horrible situation. I mean, that's one of those rare situations that, quite frankly, we don't hear about. We don't hear very much about a kid basically saying, Mom, Dad, I really need some help. And for you to sit there and say, buck up and kick it in, when this kid has the ability, in this particular case, they bought him a gun, to really hurt innocent people and take innocent people's lives. So, I mean, I understand why, it seems like the prosecution's going to take that type of stance. And saying it's like, hey, this is a legitimate manslaughter case because you could have stopped this and chose not to.
Yeah, I completely agree. Or the supermarket shooting. In Buffalo, right? Let's forget bullying or put bullying off to the side for a second. What if you are radicalized?
Yeah.
Right? If you grow up in a white supremacist home, right? And all of a sudden you're being preached to about something called replacement theory. I don't know, have you heard this?
No, that's a new one right there.
Okay. Also known as the Great Replacement Theory or Great Replacement. It's in the United States and certain other Western countries whose populations are mostly white. It's essentially a far-right conspiracy theory alleging in one of its versions that left-leaning domestic or international elites, on their own initiative or under the direction of Jewish co-conspirators, are attempting to replace white citizens with non-white, i.e. black, Hispanic, Asian, or Arab immigrants. Yeah, and so it goes on to say that the immigrants' increased presence in white countries, right, as the theory goes, in combination with their higher birth rates as compared with those of whites, I would say that, we're not producing as much as, as we used to. They're higher, so... Well, ultimately, it'll enable those other groups, black, Hispanic, Asian, or Arab, to essentially become the minority or become the majority, and whites become the minority.
I've never heard of the replacement theory. That's definitely new to me.
Well, but we're talking about the shooting in Buffalo, right? That kid was a white, definitely believed white supremacy. Went there, shooting.
I mean, he drove, from what I understand, he drove 2 hours to this store.
Exactly.
To cause this heinous crime. I mean, wow.
So, we circle back to childhood trauma, right, in some capacity. And it doesn't have to be the parents physically assaulting the child, right? It could be, like we said, they see a death of some kind and somehow that impacts them greatly, right? To parental suicides, to extreme bullying. Now you throw in radicalism, and it's just an essential a recipe for disaster,
right?
At this point, and these kids, they don't know how to cope and manage and deal with these situations. Let's throw out Louisville, for example, recently at the bank.
Yeah, and that was a guy who worked there, right?
Yeah, so he was 24, I believe he was a 24-year-old kid. He had interned there for, I believe, 2 years. Then he became an employee, and then I believe he got let go.
Okay.
And not sure what's in his history. I don't know that anything has really come out, but let's just say the fact that he got fired was enough of a traumatic experience, or maybe he wasn't fired, maybe he was downsized because they had to cut back. It's downsizing is just a politer way of saying.
What was the timeline between the time he was fired and the time that the incident happened?
I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. Yeah.
But goes into a bank with he legally had gone through the purchase of an AR-15 rifle and goes into a bank, or goes into the bank where he was working. He starts shooting. Wow. Right, and to the parents, this is a 24-year-old individual, and the mom is just floored that something like this could happen.
I mean, probably couldn't imagine her son would even do such a...
we talked about Recluse, for example. The event that happened in Chicago last 4th of July.
Yeah, actually, give me a reminder of that.
Remember that the son that lived with his dad. It was during the 4th of July parade. He was on top of the roof.
Yes.
He was, shooting up the crowd on 4th of July. You're thinking, come on, 4th of July, really? We can't have a day. So then he goes and changes his wardrobe, thinking he's going to get away. Fortunately, the cops caught him. I think it was like 30 or maybe an hour later they caught him, but he was dressed in women's clothing and they arrested him and stuff like that. But the parents said he had been really recluse and introverted, and really withdrawn in the house. Right. I mean, so it's I don't know if that's bullying, if he experienced that, but again, you're having these events where, again, kids just can't cope, can't handle, can't deal with it.
Now, that wasn't a mass shooting suicide. That was they actually arrested him. Is that correct?
But it falls under the category of mass shooting.
Yes, I understand that. I was just wondering, like, what happened to the suspect himself.
So they arrested him, but I never heard, if he's getting life in prison or they're going to just go ahead and just let him, seek the death penalty on him or anything like that. So, and then, circling back to the Alabama event that just recently happened, where the shooting was committed by a 16 and 17-year-old.
My goodness.
So I'm paying close attention to see what was going on there. Was it a hate crime of some capacity? Was it?
This was the one. It was a birthday party, wasn't it? Like a family birthday party.
Yeah, there were about 24. I forget the full number, but I think was it 6 people injured, but 26 people were shot, but 24 or so were injured in some capacity or something.
Right.
I'd have to go back and review the article to quote full specifics, but again, it illustrates my point that you've got young kids who don't know how to cope with, again, the trauma of their childhood in some capacity, whatever that is.
Did they ever figure out the reason why the shooting did they ever figure that? I mean, just what would set off a 6-year-old kid, just at a birthday? I mean, my goodness.
Yeah,
man.
It's a birthday. No, but there hasn't been anything.
Any more further details?
Yeah, and I'd have to go back and check online to see if anything has been updated. Right. So you have these mass shootings, you have these mass shootings/suicides, as well as you have the federal government and even state and local governments trying to pile on with trying to ban firearms, essentially assault style rifle. I think one other state was even calling handguns with more than 10 rounds assault style handguns.
That makes no sense at all.
I don't disagree.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm sure a lot of people who are our listeners who are understand. I mean, you'll have handguns out there where they can take 12, 16 rounds, where that doesn't automatic. I mean, that just. I feel like that's a lot of times these are people who are coming up with who either have never fired something before, or they're just listening to whatever, anti-gun or organizations who are trying to. It just doesn't make any sense.
Well, I think it's just trying to. I think it's the media's way of trying to. Tell the same story. Everybody's like, yeah, we've heard of assault rifles. Oh, assault handgun, that's new. So now I want to drive back. What's the story about? What's an assault style handgun? Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, any handgun that you go to, to a gun store this day and buy that can hold 6 rounds, right? Right. A revolver.
Smaller gun, or
now all of a sudden you kill 3 people with a revolver. Now, is that an assault style revolver now?
Yeah, I mean, I have a friend where she's got a gun with her. She keeps in her, and it's a 6-rounder, So and that kind of makes me wonder. Goes back to what I was saying before. Is this mentality of where we keep hearing about assault rifle all the time and all, but now we have this new term that you're saying, like an assault handgun. How does that make you wonder about the whole major agenda of saying, like, okay, now we have assault rifles, now we got assault handguns, okay, let's just get rid of all of them?
Well, that gets back to America's fascination with the fantasy land theory.
Yeah.
That if I take something away, these events will stop happening.
Yeah,
I've had this discussion with friends, and nobody wants to accept or embrace that in society there are just people who are going to do bad things.
It's just the way the world. We live in a broken world. And it's just, bad things happen. And unfortunately, and like I said, I mean, that's not putting down any bad situations, or that's not what we're talking about, but it's like we do realize, bad things happen. But I kind of feel, and, definitely comment on this too, Tim, but I feel that because we realize where that guns can do bad things in the wrong people's hands, doesn't mean so that there might be people out there who will do the right thing, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so you're talking about protecting yourself in the event,
or others.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a situation, in our local town, and somebody came into a mall. Just so happens to where the person who was able to kill the suspect and like that happened to be somebody who was a law-abiding citizen who happened to be a gun owner and was like 12, 14 feet away. They ended up taking care, Yeah,
you're talking about the Greenwood Mall shooting.
Yeah, the Greenwood Mall, yeah.
Where the kid came out of the bathroom in the food court and was starting to shoot up, and the guy was like 30 or 40 feet away across the food court, and he managed to land 80% of his shots and kill the...
Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, you only hear about those stories every once...
Right.
...in a great while, right? And that's just the media being the media. And
I mean, even like the two guys that were in that one church, the guy came in with the shotgun, and one of them I think was like a U.S. Marshal or something like that, and he was like 5 pews back, and he was able to eliminate the threat.
Was it him or was it the pastor? It was one of them that took out the guy at the church. I remember the story.
I think it was one guy. One guy I think was some type of law enforcement, and I think he was like 5 or 6. Because I guess the suspect entered at the front of the church.
Yep.
The suspect entered at the front of the church, and I think there was a guy who was on the side where you can go into the pews, and I think he didn't get his gun out fast enough, and that guy got shot. But the two guys who ended up taking out the suspect, one was a law officer, and I forgot the other guy, where they ended up being able to eliminate the threat.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, that was basically that story, and that aspect of the story was only talked about or reported by a very small amount of people.
Yeah, and it was only real quick, right?
Yeah, it was real quick.
And then it was gone.
And then people sat there and they looked at it, it's like, well, why did they have guns in church? I'm like, okay, that was a small church. It probably had about 50 people in it. Mm-hmm. And if, as a matter of fact, I think it was in Texas, wasn't it? And I think was it like Congress, I think Beto O'Rourke, where I think made a complaint because saying like, well, they shouldn't have had guns in and stuff like that, or where it's like, okay, I don't care what party you're part of and all, but when I hear some stupid comment like that, it's a situation of, okay, if those men were not there, prepared, had like that, instead of us talking about 2 people shot, it probably would have been 50.
Yeah.
Okay, so I applaud and I have nothing but respect for those people who are there to help and do good things. Mm-hmm.
So I completely agree, right? But it gets back to this Fantasyland theory or notion, right? And then you compound that with law-abiding individuals who enjoy the firearms hobby.
Yes.
Right? It's no...
You would consider as one of those people.
Yeah, so. I enjoy them. I like to go out. I like to go shooting. I do carry. Mm-hmm. But the government, in its infinite stupidity, wants to enact even more regulation.
So
it's a punish the masses for the actions
of one or a small group.
Yeah. And they're doing that because it's easier for them to demonize an object than it would be to demonize the individual that committed the act and is now either dead or is arrested.
Well, I mean, let's look at a situation when you mention that, it's like, they're not demonizing the person. We look back to one of the mass shootings you talked about with Sandy Hook. About a year or so later, the issue came up, where they were actually suing Remington. The company, that actually, I think whether it was made the bullets or the gun or something like that was used by the mass shooter. And they actually ended up making Remington, because they created or they manufactured the gun. They actually made them pay as settlement or whatever it was at court and everything, $75 million to the family, because basically it's a thing of, you guys made this gun, the shooter used your gun, and therefore you should be punished for that, instead of saying, okay, an individual did this, like Tim was saying earlier, where so guns don't get up in the morning and say, hey, it's a nice day, Lord, let's go, let me grab my friend magazine and cause havoc, and so I was floored when I heard that. It's like, wait, Remington had nothing to do with this. So I didn't understand. It's like, why are we not focusing on the people who are truly creating these heinous crimes? I don't understand that.
Well, because I think it's a societal thing. Mm-hmm. It's easy for society to demonize an object than it is a person. Mm-hmm. I think society would rather turn these people into martyrs than call a spade a spade.
Right.
I think another great example of what you were just referencing is Uvalde, Texas.
Yes.
The parents of the kids, that, again, that was a horrible event.
Absolutely. Absolutely
horrible. Were not only are they suing the school board and the school, mm-hmm. They are suing one of the manufacturers of the AR, and so it's by a company called Daniel Defense.
Okay.
I don't know if you're familiar with that brand, but they produce a lot of firearms for the U.S. military, and it's about, their rifles are expensive. You're looking, potentially $2,000 for a rifle. They're also suing the gun store that sold the rifle to the individual that went into the school in Uvalde and did the shooting. Mm-hmm. And they think that by going after Daniel Defense in the way that they marketed their firearms to individual will help prevent future mass shootings. But they also think suing the gun store manufacturer, because it's the gun store that sold the firearm, they think that suing the gun store, who is ultimately just a retail outlet, right? Their job is to buy and sell firearms.
Right.
They are not trained psychologists, mm-hmm. right? They're not trained therapists to look for, maybe there are certain cues, something you can tell that somebody just might be off, right? So maybe they do something. They're not trained to do that.
But I would think also too, Tim, wouldn't it be a situation where if a retail outlet store is trying to sell a gun, and I know in certain states where you have it, where it's like, you have to do some type of certain background check that maybe take like 48 hours or something like that, or just make sure the person doesn't have some type of previous record. And my question for this would be, the person who's the gun store owner, would that be a possible defense, or do we even know that maybe he did do a background check? And
so he passed a background check, and if you go through some of the examples that I've looked through, it's either one, or that I've mentioned, either one, kids have had access to their parents' gun safes,
right?
Okay, number one, or they went to a firearms retail outlet and bought one and passed the background check,
right?
Okay. Because background checks, they look at your criminal background. Have you had any felonies? or anything like that, which will disqualify you from purchasing a firearm if you have a felony.
Sure.
Right, but since these kids, their backgrounds for the most part, if not all, are completely clean.
Yeah.
They're going to pass, but somehow it's the retail outlet's responsibility to potentially flag people who may be suffering from some sort of mental illness or maybe I hate to say like episode, but maybe they're having something, but it's internal. They're not trained to look at that.
Yeah, it's like what you said. I mean, they're not psychologists, so I mean, they're not going to sit there and notice those little things. They're just going to, okay, our state or federal protocol is to make sure that if Andy's looking for a gun, I have to put all this information in and all, and if it turns out he gets the green light or so that's where where it all goes. Where it's like you can't be a gun owner and a psychologist at the same time. It's like it just So yeah, I wonder how much the prosecution's stand is going to go on by when it comes to the owner, if he's done everything. From what I understand, you know a lot more about guns than I do, but from what I understand, where is that that's a normal protocol of being able to do a background check before selling something, and then at that point you don't know what's going on in that person's. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's like, would you say that's something that we need to improve on or so? But based on what the information that you just given, I find it very hard to say that the owner is the reason why. So when he's done all the protocol things that's mandatory for gun owners, gun sellers to do.
Right, and so these background checks, they don't look at medical history, because medical history is protected information under the HIPAA Act. Right. Now there's lawmakers that are trying to figure out the background check process needs to be a lot more thorough. It needs to dive into a person's mental background, right? So now you're getting into medical information, which is also protected, as I said, but who's to say, they try to go to talk to the doctor who is the psychologist for somebody because they go see a psychologist, right?
Right.
What if that individual has been battling depression for years? They manage it. They have it under control. You would never know that someone like that has maybe been suffering from some sort of depression. And would you disqualify that person because it gets incredibly subjective, incredibly quick. I think the reality is, part of it starts at home.
Yeah.
I think a big part of it starts at home, with parents and their kids and looking at the behavior. It's being a parent, obviously it's going to be tough because you're going to sit here and think, well, this could never happen to my son, right?
Yeah.
I sometimes talk to my son about this. Are you okay? Yeah. But you never really know what's going on underneath,
right?
For example. But I don't know that expanding backgrounds to take in someone's previous mental history is the answer.
Right.
I think I don't think there is a clear-cut answer to this, but I don't believe that turning these people into martyrs, and what I mean by that is, these people that will ultimately, if they didn't commit suicide during their mass shooting, they're arrested, right? And so now they're sitting in jail. It's our taxpayer money being spent to house this person. And then you have the education institutions now want to essentially study this guy and try to figure out what really caused you to do.
What's a variable where that's something that we can possibly prevent in the future?
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So now you're giving validity in some capacity to this person. And I'll be honest, I think in some of these instances where mass shootings have taken place, it was solely done for attention.
Mm-hmm.
Solely, and there had been, in some of these examples that I noted, there had been statements where, do you see me now? Do you recognize me now? Do you know who I am now?
Right.
Right. So it's, again, it gets back to, on a certain level, kids feeling
isolated,
ostracized. We've talked about bullying as well, and that that's a common thread. So there is no magic bullet to solve this issue, and some of the critics who may listen to this say, well, you're just saying, well, our society, we just have to live with mass shootings. And my answer to that is, it's unfortunate that these events happen.
You're right.
And there isn't anything that's going to stop somebody from doing something if it's well planned out. And I'm going to go back to the example of the recent Tennessee school shooting.
Right.
This person had identified 2 places he had scratched, or he was a transgender person, I take that back, had identified 2 places, identified the school that they once went to, and then another place, and he picked the school because the less likelihood of security.
Yeah, so they did the recon.
Yeah, they did, and so they know, right? And I would love to think that we have the capability, and I believe that we do have the capability, but again, I do believe it starts at home. I don't think more gun laws on top of the gun laws that are out there are the answer. I don't think an assault weapons ban is the answer, because that only would prevent new people from buying assault weapons. What about the ones whose parents or they already own one?
Right.
Or
people who just mean well.
Or they get it through third-party means, i.e. the black market, for example.
Right.
They obtain it illegally. That happens all the time.
And I would think with some of these laws and policies they plan on doing, it's like, things that would be sold on the black market would actually go up more, because criminals would want to have those, if that's going to be it, if you're going to be trying to put together these anti-gun laws, or if that makes sense.
Right.
So
I think part of it is a major emphasis on bullying in schools. I think we have to give some authority back to schools.
Yeah.
Right. I think teachers have had their authority stripped in some capacity.
Yeah.
I remember getting paddled by a gym teacher for using a swear word when I was a kid in elementary school.
Shit, I remember it was 5th or 6th grade or where, so you said something wrong, she made us hang over the chair or something.
Yeah,
sit in the corner and all the other stuff.
I've got my knuckles cracked by a teacher in elementary school and stuff like that. I mean, it's schools are not places where kids are sent, where it's essentially their babysit. They need to be taught. They need to be educated, but teachers have to have some power in the classroom.
Right.
So I think it's a combination of, it starts at home. Kids have to be educated about the power and horrors of social media. They need to be taught that their social media presence does not represent their real presence. of who they really are. Right? We need to get power back to schools, and we need better mental health support in this country.
Yeah.
And that is, I think if we put more effort, I think if we put the same effort we put into the drunk driving programs that were out there when drunk driving was a major problem. What was it? What is it? Mad Mothers Against Drunk Driving.
Right.
We don't have programs similar to this where we're trying to prevent future mass shootings. I mean, schools have what's called active shooter drills, but we don't have programs centered around, to my knowledge, I could be wrong. Hopefully I'm wrong in this instance. I'd like to think that programs are being developed to help kids deal with bullying and traumatic events and stuff. But I think part of it is education in the school, and I think with mental health being such a hot topic and more people are experiencing mental health issues, especially post-COVID.
Yes. People not being used to being isolated like that.
Right. And I think those things will help curb these types of events. They won't stop.
Right. And that's just being honest. Unfortunately, but yeah, it's just the truth.
It's not going to stop, just like we can't prevent people from murder.
Yeah.
Right? We can't prevent people from robbing stores. We can't prevent people from stealing. We can't prevent kids from running downtown Chicago, destroying downtown Chicago.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Same with these mobs that were in California raiding retail outlets, just running in, grabbing stuff.
Right.
And then what was it? You had mentioned, we were talking about this earlier. What was it? CVS had closed, or Walgreens had closed. Like how many stores?
If I understand, it's like in California, I think they've closed it was 11 stores, and then even recently in Chicago, where I think they're now about to close, or they're about to close, I think 4 Walmarts that are going on just because of the amount of stealing and different violence and stuff. And then I think even in California, I think they had some mob where try to break into the inside of a gas, and while the guy was there, and I guess had bulletproof glass, stuff like that, and they broke in just to take all the different stuff. And it's really, really just sad. It's just to see, but I agree. It's like, if you can figure out where these problems are before we get to the mass shootings and doing all those different things, so maybe that would help to prevent a lot of or at least be able to see, these things, before they come, to figure out, in this particular case, of a kid having, a major issue, and be able to get him the help that he needs, or like you said, a situation of the kid saying to his parents, hey, you know what, I really need some serious help, and, people being really attentive, and also that we won't have to be dealing with the unfortunate situation of this happening. And also, so no, I agree with you on that. It's just it's a horrible situation. I think we do need to start putting more of the blame on the shooters themselves and not so much the manufacturers, and be able to like I said, I mean, it's just been such a really rough time in these last couple weeks, and everything between Nashville and other situations that are going on, and also dealing with guns, and where even the situation we were talking about a little earlier, where about the the poor kid that was going to go pick up his brother, and ended up at the wrong address, and an 81-year-old man ends up shooting him, and it's kind of like, wait a minute, it's like, I bring that up and up because it shows an example of like that, there's certain people out there where it's like, should you really be having, a gun? And if that pertains, when we're talking, but yeah, I was just kind of, it's just those little things where that just get you really, really concerned, But I do agree that it has to be a situation of, we really need to start putting the blame where it should be, and that, I agree. It's like trying to put on these more and more laws and policies where on top of policies that seem like, and obviously I can speak for Chicago, that aren't working, because we still get 600 to one time we had 729, I think it was like 3 years ago, 729 homicides. Or shoot, we had this was normal. And this is a city where it has all types of policies, and obviously it's not working.
Right.
So I mean, I quite frankly, I think the previous mayor, ended up losing because of that. Because there was nothing done about the amount of gun violence that was going on in the city of Chicago.
Well, and I think they're just one example of, because the state of Illinois has some of the most restrictive gun laws, and you see that even with some of the most restrictive gun laws in the country, violence is still happening.
Right, exactly.
Gun violence is still happening. Theft is still happening. Murders are still happening.
Right. And like you said, that's not going to end, unfortunately.
No. And we're not going to solve this issue, on this podcast, but we at least hopefully are getting people to wake up and start thinking for themselves, and hopefully our listeners will do some of their own investigative educational work versus just being spoon-fed directly from your local news or from the national news, right? And take the time to really figure out, and like I said, we're not going to solve it here. There isn't a magic bullet or one specific act that's going to prevent these. Again, these mass shootings / suicides, they're horrible. They're absolutely horrible. Schools used to be a safe place. Now they're not, which is terrible. Malls used to be a safe place. Now they're maybe not. I would like to think that go to a mall if I need to get a shirt and just be able to go and do that and not have to worry about but you can't anymore.
Right. Colleges, universities, churches, all these places I think are safe places that people can go. And now it's because we have these fears where it's a horrible time, so in that manner. So
all right, Unwoke Nation, we would love to get your thoughts and feedback on this topic. You can reach us at feedback@unwoketheshow.com. Again, that is feedback@unwoketheshow.com. Rich, it was a pleasure as always. And Unwoke Nation, we will catch you guys next week.
See you next week, guys.